Thank you very much. Our next and final speaker will be Ms. Mari Inoue from Human Rights Now.
Thank you so much. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to thank all the people who showed up today. I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to PSR as well as Mr. Gruber, who came all the way to New York City to make presentation today. Before I start my presentation, I also like to give some developments in Japan, which is that Human Rights Now issued a press release objecting to the showing some concerns to the UNSCEAR summary report on Fukushima. And our statement was endorsed by more than 64 civil society groups in Japan. And we request that the United Nations Science Committee and the United Nations General Assembly Fourth Committee revise the report of the UNSCEAR report on Fukushima from a human rights perspective to protect the most vulnerable people based on careful and sufficient deliberations. Human Rights Now is an international NGO originally established in 2006 in Tokyo. We have about 700 members. We have many members who are Japanese attorneys who have license to practice law. We also have college professors, law school professors who teach international law or humanitarian law or other aspects of Japanese domestic law in Japan. We mainly focus on the human rights situation in East Asia, and we investigate human rights situation in conflict area as well. We have published statements, reports, and policy proposals, and we do lobbying to Japanese government agencies. We also organize seminars and press conference to educate the public and also the media to raise awareness on the situation. After March 11, 2011, we established a new project team called Earthquake Relief Project because we realized that a human rights situation in affected areas is something that we have to raise within the international community so that the situation there will get more international attention. We also regularly go to affected areas such as Iwate and Fukushima prefectures to provide free legal consultations to inform people what kind of rights they have and listen to their concerns in very difficult situation. And there are a lot of people who are still struggling, even though it's almost 3 years since the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident. Prior to March 11th, we'd like to emphasize that the radiation dose limit for general public was 1 millisieverts per year, excluding background radiation. And this is a chart which is written in Japanese, but I wanted to bring this up to you because Japanese government in 20th century, later in 20th century, they amended the Japanese domestic law in order to provide the in order to expand the eligibility of A-bomb survivors so that they will be entitled to compensations. And based on the recommendations by ICRP, which was published in 1990, one of the elements that you have to show in order to be recognized as the A-bomb survivor is that you are within the 3.5 kilometer from the hypercenter. This one is an example in Nagasaki. And the reason why they amended their domestic law was because if you are within the 3.5 kilometer from the hypercenter in 1945 in Nagasaki, it is suspected that you will be exposed to 1 millisieverts per year of radiation dose. So 1 millisieverts per year standard has been respected for years in Japan prior to March 11th. And also when there was a nuclear criticality accident in Japan in 1999, Japanese government provided health monitoring and health exams to residents residing near the nuclear facility if they are suspected of being exposed to 1 millisieverts of radiation. Policy after the nuclear accident. As Mr. Gerber mentioned in his presentation, Japanese government designated evacuation zones based on 20 millisieverts per year standard. So basically, they raised from 1 millisieverts per year standard to 20 millisieverts per year standard because there was an accident. That doesn't mean that people will be more strong to radiation dose. They also kept sending messages to the media as well as to the general public that no evidence of physical harm under 100 millisieverts per year. And they continue to downplay health risks associated with the low-dose radiation exposure below 100 millisieverts per year. They even published textbooks containing the above assertions and distributed them to public schools. And all relevant policies in contaminated areas established without citizens' participation. Currently, there's evacuation zones which is around the Fukushima Daiichi. There is a 20-kilometer radius which is an evacuation zone, and also the evacuation zone goes beyond the 20-kilometer radius, because at one point after the nuclear accident, the wind was blowing to the northwest part of Japan from Fukushima Daiichi, and Itatemura and other villages were heavily affected by radioactive plume. And there are 3 subcategories in evacuation zones as of August 8, 2013. The pink area is considered difficult to return zones because the radiation dose is considered 50 millisieverts per year or above. Orange area is called non-residence zones because the radiation dose is estimated between 20 to 50 millisieverts a year. And green zones, which is part of the 20-kilometer radius and also outside the 20-kilometer zones. Green zones is called zones preparing for the evacuation order to be lifted because they consider that it will be below 20 millisieverts per year. And especially in green zones, Japanese government is providing extensive decontamination activity so that the area will go below 20 millisieverts standard, so that they will be able to lift the evacuation order. So if you look at the, this is the latest evacuation zones that I could find. But if you compare the evacuation zones in 2011, 2012, and 2013, you will see that the evacuation zone is shrinking. So what will happen after evacuation orders are lifted? There's an example in Date City, which is about 55 kilometers from Fukushima Daiichi. Parts of the Date City was classified as specific spots recommended for evacuation, which is a zone which does not exist anymore. But they were designated as specific spots recommended for evacuation because the integral dose over a 1-year period after the accident exceeded 20 millisieverts. And relying on the 20 millisieverts per year exposure dose standard, the government lifted evacuation orders suddenly in December 2012 without any explanations to local citizens. As I explained to you earlier, local citizens are not part of the decision-making process, and their voices are not heard when this new development was made, decision was made by the government. And 3 months later, TEPCO stopped providing compensations to evacuees from Date City, and many evacuees couldn't afford living in less contaminated area outside Fukushima Prefecture and other part of the Fukushima Prefecture with less contaminated environment. And therefore, many evacuees from the area were pressed into returning to the contaminated areas without financial support. And that could happen to these green zones in the future. And there are thousands of people were evacuated from green zones. So some of them might not be able to stay in the temporary housing outside of Fukushima Prefecture, and they might go back to Fukushima Prefecture within the former evacuation zones if the financial support would not be provided. Health-related issues after the nuclear accident. First, the thyroid exam. One thing that people don't know much is that first round of thyroid exam has not completed yet, because they started from October 2011, but the first round of thyroid exam to children will be completed sometime next year. And this thyroid exam provided by the Fukushima Prefecture and Japanese government are provided only to young children who are 18 years old or younger as of March 2011. And after April 2014, thyroid exams will be conducted every 2 years until the child turns 20 years old, and even 5 years after that, and every 5 years after that. After health exams such as blood tests or urine tests are not conducted, except to those who are subject to secondary exams due to the size of nodules, or cysts. So unless the nodules are larger than 5.1 millimeter or the cysts larger than 20.1 millimeter, they won't be able to get additional exam. And also there are other issues as well. Copies of children's medical records are not released to the parents unless an official information disclosure procedure is taken. So you go to the medical office and you ask for a copy of your file. That's possible here in the United States, but in Fukushima Prefecture, you have to fill out the form and submit it to the designated office to get your medical record or your children's medical record. Children's and their children and their parents can have access to the important information about children's health condition, even if some abnormalities are found. And ultrasound images of thyroid exams are not disclosed, and there are reports that many doctors refuse to provide secondary exams or secondary opinion or provide additional exams or treatment. And the Fukushima Health Management Survey it has so many issues because its targets are too limited, the contents are inadequate, and the procedural steps for citizens to access their own medical records are problematic. As Mr. Gerber mentioned earlier in his presentation, he visited Japan for country mission in November 2012. On behalf of Japanese civil society groups, Human Rights Now requested Human Rights Council to send special rapporteur on the right to health and also right to housing and special rapporteur on toxic waste to visit Japan. And we submitted such request in July 2011. And initially, Mr. Gruber showed interest to visit Japan in November 2011, but in order for special rapporteur to visit a country, the government has to officially welcome them as a host country. And his visit could not realize until November 2012. that's how the process is taking. And these are the only things that a human rights organization could do, because going to the evacuation zones to conduct the fact-finding mission, or go to the TEPCO or Fukushima Daiichi to conduct the fact-finding mission of nuclear workers' labor condition is not possible. And this could happen in any other situation after a nuclear accident anywhere in the world, because NGOs will not sacrifice their members' life or health to go into the highly contaminated area. And Mr. Gruber's report on his findings and recommendations was submitted to the Human Rights Council in May 2013, and they had a dialogue with the Japanese government. And they also submitted, Japanese government also submitted response to his recommendations. Mr. Gruber mentioned about the list of recommendations that he provided to the Japanese government. And I would like to emphasize two important recommendations, which is that we request Japanese government to listen to Mr. Gruber's recommendations as to re-establishing national plan of evacuation zones and dose limit of radiation by using current scientific evidence based on human rights rather than on the risk-benefit analysis, and reduce the radiation dose to less than 1 millisieverts per year. And also we request the government to ensure effective community participation, especially participation of vulnerable groups in all aspects of the decision-making processes related to nuclear energy policy and the nuclear regulatory framework, including decisions regarding nuclear power plant operations, evacuation zones, radiation limits, health monitoring, and compensation amounts. And also we'd like to emphasize that importance of providing a regular health monitoring system for nuclear workers who are sacrificing their health in order to deal with the situation in Fukushima Daiichi. And as Mr. Gruber mentioned, that many of the homeless people are targeted for cheap labor in Japanese nuclear industry for a long time, and many of them do not necessarily have good health condition even before they started working for the Fukushima Daiichi. So that piece of information is not something that UNSCEAR have looked into when they analyze the radiation dose and health risks associated with the radiation dose of the nuclear worker in Fukushima Daiichi. I would like to also mention about the Japanese government's responses to Mr. Gruber's recommendations. Overall response is that Japanese government is unwilling to implement the recommendations. They claim that many of the recommendations are unscientific. They also rejected the recommendation related to radiation dose level less than 1 millisieverts per year by noting that based on the data from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it is believed that the effects on health from radiation exposure are less significant than the effects from other causes or non-existent as long as the exposure is at level of 100 millisieverts or less. And interestingly, this statement is not consistent with the recent studies by the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, which show the health risks associated with a low-dose radiation exposure of affected people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the Radiation Effects Research Foundation is a binational foundation established by the Minister of Health of Japan and also Department of Energy of the United States, which is the successor of the ABCC, Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. So they were basically established to study from government perspective, and Japanese government's response to Mr. Gruber's recommendation is not even consistent with their foundation's studies. I would like to give you some background of UNSCEAR, United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation. It is established in 1955 to assess and report levels of effects of exposure to ionizing radiation. The General Assembly has designated 27 countries to provide scientists as members of the committee. Japan became the member of UNSCEAR in 1955, and interestingly, that was before they joined the United Nations, because there was objections from Soviet bloc when they applied for a membership to the United Nations in early 1950s, and the application was not processed and approved until 1956. However, they were able to join UNSCEAR in 1955. So Japan's involvement with the United Nations system started with the UNSCEAR. It mandates the UN system. UNSCEAR's mandate in the UN system is to assess and report levels and effects of exposure to ionizing radiation. And they have issued 21 major publications since 1955, and these reports are highly regarded as principal sources of authoritative information according to the UNSCEAR's website. As I mentioned before, civil society groups, 64 civil society groups in Japan and Human Rights Now has serious concern that the investigation and the summary report on UNSCEAR has many issues in terms of objectivity, independence, and accuracy. And the underestimation of the effects of radiation exposure could have negative effects on the human rights and protection of people. And one of the things that they are mandated to do by the General Assembly, according to the resolution in December 2012, when they were mandated to work on the radiological consequences from the nuclear accident in Fukushima, was that they had to maintain the independent role and also maintain the independence of judgment. General Assembly also encouraged them, encouraged non-government organizations concerned to provide further relevant data about doses, effects, and risks from various sources of radiation, which would greatly help in the preparation of future reports of scientific committee to the General Assembly. However, UNSCEAR committee did not consult with NGOs or any science organization or third party before drafting the scientific report of the summary report of the Fukushima, and also they did not conduct the independent investigation in Fukushima. So they did not go to Fukushima to talk with people who are affected by the earthquake and the nuclear accident, nor they had interviews with nuclear workers who worked or who work in the Fukushima Daiichi. And there might be a potential conflict of interest of experts involved in the UNSCEAR report. They mentioned about involvement of 80 scientists who are involved in analyzing data and drafting the final report, which might be published sometime later this year or beginning of next year. UNSCEAR did not conduct any independent investigation in Fukushima, nor met citizens affected by the nuclear accident, even though hundreds of thousands of people's lives were disrupted by the nuclear accident, nor interviewed workers employed in the nuclear industry. The source of data is questionable. Data comes not from NGOs or citizens groups or from local citizens, but data comes only from the government agencies, Fukushima Prefectural Government, and TEPCO. We know that the Japanese government and TEPCO has not been truthful in disclosing the extent and the gravity of the situation, so that just relying on the data from those sources might not show the whole picture of the accident. And there is a serious concern that their report might be used by the Japanese government to justify their problematic policies in terms of radiation dose limit, evacuation zones, and other policies which is supposed to be used to protect the local citizens. And UNSCEAR report is not consistent with the Chapter 1 of the UN Charter or the purpose of the United Nations, one of which is to achieve international cooperation in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights. And also, the UNSCEAR summary report was dated on August 7th, 2013. And we all know that the issues associated with the contamination water, highly contaminated water leaking from the Fukushima Daiichi was started to being reported sometime in August. And we also heard that additional thyroid cancer cases among children that was reported in the middle of August. So those issues are not analyzed when they concluded the summary report of Fukushima. According to the press release of UNSCEAR, which is dated May 31st, 2013, they clearly stated that radiation exposure following the nuclear accident of Fukushima Daiichi did not cause any immediate health effects. It is unlikely to be able to attribute to any health effects in the future among the general public and the vast majority of workers. So they are saying that no health effects, no immediate health effects, and no future health effects. Global implication of the UNSCEAR report is something that we should all look into, because Fukushima disaster is not the issue of Japanese community. It's an issue that entire world needs to pay attention to. If there's another radiological contamination due to accidents or radiological leak from a nuclear facility, the UNSCEAR report might be used to lax existing radiation dose limits of general public in the area. That's what Japanese government did. They raised the radiation dose limit of general public from 1 millisieverts per year to 20 millisieverts per year, and it is very reasonable to think that other governments would do the same if there is another radiological contamination in other countries. What about the possible health effects from ongoing radioactive water leaks? We know that a summary report was dated prior to this ongoing radioactive water leaks from the Fukushima Daiichi, and that is probably leaking into the groundwater and possibly to the ocean, and that will change the equation of the contamination in the Pacific Ocean. What about the possible effects from the incineration of highly radioactive waste? Because now Japanese government is planning to incinerate extremely highly radioactive waste that was produced in Fukushima Prefecture. This is unprecedented steps by a government, because Chernobyl disaster did not have incineration issues of highly radioactive waste. So once the highly radioactive waste is incinerated, what will happen to the environment? And WHO, World Health Organization, which objective is the attainment by all people of the highest possible level of health, is not playing a leadership role in providing technical assistance and guidance in creating policies and measures to protect the right to health of those affected by the nuclear accident. I also like to give you some information that there is a issue associated with the relationship between World Health Organization and IAEA. They entered into the agreement in 1959, which basically says that a World Health Organization will not intervene to International Atomic Energy Agency, which has the primary responsibility for encouraging, assisting, and coordinating research and development and practical application of atomic energy for peaceful use throughout the world. So basically, many experts in Europe as well as here in the United States has been calling for annulment or dissolving the agreement between the World Health Organization and IAEA, because we know that World Health Organization is now playing a leadership role after the Fukushima disaster, and we don't know whether this agreement is one of the reasons for that. And also I'd like to point out that all countries which are members of the United Nations may become members of WHO by accepting its constitution, and Japan is a member of World Health Organization. An important quote from the Constitution of World Health Organization states that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. The enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of health is one of the fundamental rights of every human being, without distinction of race, religion, political belief, economic, and social condition. The health of all people is fundamental to the attainment of peace and security, and is dependent upon the fullest cooperation of individuals and states. We also would like to talk about, before I talk about what NGOs can do, we also like to show some of the examples that the World Health Organization is now playing an important role in establishing policies on the situation in Iraq. Beginning of this year, Human Rights Now conducted a fact-finding mission in Iraq, which was heavily contaminated by ammunitions used during the Iraqi war. And now, even this year, dozens of babies were born with severe birth defects, and many experts, although the cause of the birth defects are unknown, many experts says that the ammunition, the depleted uranium ammunition used during the war might be the cause of this birth defects rising in Iraq. And World Health Organization conducted a fact-finding mission in Iraq last year, and they supposed to publish a report identifying the cause of such rising of birth defects in Iraq. However, they issued a summary report a couple of weeks ago saying that we didn't see much rise in birth defects in those areas. So once again, we request World Health Organizations to provide technical assistance and guidance in creating policies and measures to tackle the issues not just in Iraq but also in other contaminated areas such as Fukushima. Lastly, I'd like to give you some ideas as to what NGOs can do to raise awareness on the situation in Fukushima. One of the things, if you are involved with the NGOs, physicians organizations or scientist organizations, you could read the PSR IPPNW Germany's statement, which criticizes the summary report of UNSCEAR on Fukushima. And you could endorse the PSR statement to show that you support their scientific findings, and they did an amazing job in articulating 10 major issues associated with the summary report on UNSCEAR. Another thing that NGO could do is to form an international coalition of NGOs and write a letter to the Human Rights Council to request a country mission of UN Special Rapporteurs on toxic waste and water and sanitation. in order to prevent further damage to the environment and to protect people's right to health beyond the national border. Human Rights Now requested such requests of country mission by UN Special Rapporteurs on toxic waste and water and sanitation a couple of months ago. But it seems like they are not interested in coming to Japan sometime soon. So perhaps the environmental organizations or science organizations could form a coalition of NGOs to issue such a letter. Once again, it could be a long shot, but it might take a while for the process, but that could be something the NGO could think about. And also, if you have connections with the representatives of member states, please talk to the representatives of member states about the ongoing nuclear crisis in Japan, and also about upcoming full UNSCEAR report on Fukushima and potential issues. One of the other things that you might think about is that drafting a resolution, General Assembly resolution, and ask Japanese government to propose it at the General Assembly, possibly at the third committee, asking for international cooperation to mitigate and minimize the consequences of Fukushima nuclear disaster, which was something that Ukrainian government did in 1990, and they continue to propose such resolution and endorsed by majority of states every year. And Ukraine did it because the Chernobyl happened in Ukraine, Republic of Ukraine. So the ideal option is that Japanese government will come to the international society and ask them for international help by proposing such proposal. If they're not going to do that, then other member states could propose such a resolution, but it might have some diplomatic issues as well. And thank you so much for your attention, and I'd like to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.